The Zephyrian war fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their sleek silver vessels cutting through the clouds with predatory grace. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue-green world grow larger in the viewscreen. His forearms flexed with anticipation, each ending in razor-sharp claws that had torn through the defenses of 17 worlds. "Another primitive planet," he hissed to his tactical officer. "Their technology is laughably outdated. Chemical propulsion, nuclear fission, electromagnetic communications. We'll have this world conquered within a solar cycle." The Zephyrian Empire had swept across this spiral arm of the galaxy like a plague. Their military doctrine was simple and effective: overwhelming force, technological superiority, and absolute brutality. No species had ever successfully resisted them for more than a few rotations. This blue world called Earth would be no different. Lieutenant Krikstal manipulated the tactical display with his secondary arms, while his primary hands operated the scanning equipment. Admiral. Their largest military installations appear to be concentrated in specific regions: desert areas, plains, coastal zones. Standard defensive positioning for a primitive species. Vextar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for Zephyrian laughter. Of course. They cluster their forces like frightened prey animals. Begin the orbital bombardment. Target their military bases, communication arrays, and population centers. Leave enough survivors to serve as laborers. The first wave of plasma bombardment lit up Earth's night sky. Military bases in Nevada, Colorado, and Virginia vanished in brilliant flashes. The Pentagon, NORAD, and dozens of other installations were reduced to smoking craters within minutes. Communication satellites went dark. The internet collapsed. Television broadcasts ended mid-sentence. But the Zephyrians had made their first mistake. They had studied human civilization, but they had never truly understood it. They saw the obvious military installations, the cities, the infrastructure. They never looked deeper into the places humans feared to tread. In the Amazon rainforest, thousands of miles from any major city, something stirred in the green darkness. Marcus Chen had been living in the jungle for 6 years, ever since the incident that had made him the most wanted man on 3 continents. The former Delta Force sniper had disappeared into the vast wilderness after a mission had gone catastrophically wrong, taking with him skills that governments would kill to possess and knowledge that could topple nations. He felt the ground shake as the orbital bombardment began. Through his modified military radio, he caught fragments of panicked transmissions before they cut to static. The attacks weren't random. They were surgical, precise, targeting every major military installation with devastating efficiency. Marcus moved through the jungle like a shadow, his weathered face grim beneath 6 years of growth. His camp was hidden beneath layers of camouflage that would fool even satellite imagery. Solar panels disguised as fallen logs powered his equipment. Rain collection systems provided water. The jungle provided food for those who knew how to take it, but it was his weapons cache that would have made generals weep with envy. Buried in waterproof containers throughout a 5-mile radius were rifles, explosives, surveillance equipment, and ammunition enough to outfit a small army. Every piece of gear was military grade, liberated during his escape from black site operations that officially never existed. The radio crackled with an emergency broadcast from what remained of the government. "This is Emergency Protocol 7. Unknown hostile forces have attacked military installations worldwide. All civilian populations are advised to seek immediate shelter. All military personnel report to designated rally points." Marcus snorted. Rally points that were probably already smoking craters. He'd seen enough asymmetric warfare to know how this would play out. The aliens, whatever they were, had superior technology and the advantage of surprise. Conventional military resistance would be crushed within days. But they had never faced someone like him. Through his binoculars, Marcus watched as strange silver craft began descending into the jungle. Landing parties, most likely. Scouts to assess the terrain and eliminate any remaining threats. The ships were beautiful in their alien design, but they made noise. In the jungle, noise was death. The first Zephyrian patrol entered his territory 3 hours after sunset. 6 soldiers in powered armor, moving in standard formation. Their equipment painted them in brilliant infrared signatures against the cool jungle background. They spoke in clicking, chittering sounds that hurt human ears. Marcus observed them from a concealed position 200 meters away. Their armor looked advanced, probably capable of stopping conventional small arms fire, but he'd learned long ago that every piece of equipment had weaknesses. The joints, the visors, the power systems. There were always vulnerabilities if you knew where to look and had the patience to wait for the perfect shot. The lead Zephyrian raised some kind of scanning device, sweeping it across the jungle. Looking for life signs, probably. Marcus had dealt with thermal imaging before. A layer of space blanket under his ghillie suit, combined with the jungle's natural heat signature confusion, made him invisible to most scanning systems. One of the aliens gestured toward his position, not directly at him, but close enough to be concerning. Maybe their sensors were better than he'd hoped. Time to move. Marcus began what he did best. He became the jungle itself. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. He moved through the undergrowth like smoke, repositioning to maintain sightlines while remaining invisible. The aliens continued their sweep, unaware that death was watching them from the shadows. The Zephyrian patrol spent 2 hours searching his territory before moving on. Marcus tracked them for another mile before breaking contact. He'd learned what he needed to know. Their armor was sophisticated but bulky. Their movements suggested they were adapted for different gravity. Their scanning equipment was good but not perfect. Most importantly, they were overconfident. That night, Marcus began planning. The world's armies might be in ruins, but the war was far from over. The jungle had claimed many victims over the millennia. It was about to claim a few more. He opened his first weapons cache and began selecting his tools. The Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifle would punch through most armor. The captured Russian Dragunov was perfect for medium-range work, and the custom-modified M4 with suppressor would handle close quarters if necessary. But weapons were only part of the equation. The jungle itself was his greatest advantage. Every trail, every stream, every hidden cave within 50 square miles was mapped in his mind. He knew where the ground was soft enough for improvised graves, where the canopy was thick enough to hide muzzle flashes, where the echoes would confuse acoustic sensors trying to locate gunfire. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 worlds through superior technology and brute force. But they had never fought an enemy who knew every leaf, every shadow, every sound in his domain. They had never faced someone who had spent 6 years becoming one with the most unforgiving environment on Earth. Marcus checked his rifle and loaded a magazine of armor-piercing rounds. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The aliens thought they were hunting in an empty jungle. They were about to discover they had entered the territory of Earth's most dangerous predator. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn why humans were the apex species on their world, and why the jungle had claimed more lives than any weapon of war. They thought they were the hunters. They were wrong. The morning mist clung to the jungle floor like a living thing, muffling sound and obscuring vision in the gray half-light before dawn. Marcus had been in position for 3 hours, his body perfectly still in a hide he'd constructed from fallen branches and jungle debris. The Barrett rifle lay beside him, its massive barrel extending through a carefully camouflaged firing port. 2 miles away, the Zephyrian forward operating base hummed with alien activity. Through his scope, Marcus could see the silver prefabricated structures rising from the cleared jungle like mechanical mushrooms. Guards patrolled the perimeter in their powered armor, confident in their technological superiority. They had reason for confidence. The base was protected by energy shields that could deflect orbital bombardment. Automated defense turrets tracked any movement larger than a small animal. The aliens themselves wore armor that could stop tank rounds and had weapons that could melt through steel like butter. But Marcus wasn't planning to assault the base. He was going to make them come to him. The first kill came at 8:47 hours. A Zephyrian patrol had wandered into the killing field Marcus had prepared 3 kilometers from their base. The alien scout was examining strange marks on a tree when Marcus squeezed the trigger. The 50 caliber armor-piercing round took the Zephyrian's head clean off, the massive impact sending the body spinning into the undergrowth. The other patrol members immediately took cover, their heads swiveling as they tried to locate the threat. But Marcus was already gone, moving through predetermined escape routes toward his second position. The shot had been fired from 800 meters away, through a narrow gap in the canopy that existed for exactly 3 minutes each morning when the sun was at the right angle. By the time the Zephyrians reached the firing position, they found only empty jungle. No brass casings, no footprints, no sign that anyone had ever been there. The humidity and thick vegetation had already begun to erase even the scent traces. Commander Thisica arrived at the patrol's position within an hour, his 4 arms gesticulating angrily as he examined the scene. He was a veteran of the Centauri campaigns, where the Empire had faced the most technologically advanced resistance to date. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for an enemy who could strike without warning and vanish like smoke. "Scan everything," he ordered his technical specialists. "Heat signatures, chemical traces, electromagnetic disturbances. Find me this sniper." The scanners found nothing. The jungle was too alive, too full of conflicting signatures and natural interference. Every tree, every animal, every drop of moisture created noise that made detection impossible. It was like trying to find a single star in the brightness of a nebula. The second kill came 6 hours later. This time, Marcus had positioned himself on the far side of the base, using a different rifle and a different technique. A Zephyrian officer was supervising the construction of a communication array when Marcus put a round through the alien's torso from nearly a kilometer away. The shot punched through a gap in the armor plating that existed only when the officer raised his arms in a particular gesture. Marcus had studied their movements for hours to identify that vulnerability. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon, and he had unlimited amounts of it. The base erupted into activity. Patrols doubled, then tripled. The aliens began sweeping the jungle in expanding circles, their scanners working overtime. But Marcus was always one step ahead, moving through paths only he knew, using the jungle's natural concealment like a living camouflage system. Commander Thisica called for orbital support. Energy beams lanced down from the ships above, turning suspected sniper positions into smoking craters. Ancient trees that had stood for centuries were reduced to ash in seconds, but Marcus wasn't hiding in any position they could imagine. His third hide was inside a massive cecropia tree, hollowed out years ago by insects and expanded by Marcus into a perfect sniper's nest. The tree appeared dead from the outside, just another piece of jungle decay. Inside, it was a fortress with multiple firing ports and escape routes. The third kill was personal. Marcus had intercepted alien communications and run them through translation software he'd acquired during his Black Ops days. The Zephyrians were planning to use incendiary weapons on the entire jungle, burning everything in a 10-kilometer radius to eliminate the threat. They would destroy one of Earth's last great wilderness areas to kill one man. He couldn't allow that. The target was Commander Thisica himself. The alien leader had established a forward command post on a ridge overlooking the jungle, confident that his personal shields and guards would protect him. Marcus spent 18 hours moving into position, crawling through mud and undergrowth, ignoring the insects, snakes, and other jungle hazards that would have driven most men insane. The shot was impossible by any reasonable standard. 1,200 meters through jungle canopy, with wind variables, humidity distortion, and a target that was only visible for seconds at a time. Marcus waited for 6 hours, controlling his breathing, calculating angles, reading the microscopic changes in air movement. When Thisica finally moved into the narrow firing lane, Marcus was ready. The bullet traveled for nearly 3 seconds before impact, dropping through gaps in the leaves like a guided missile. It took the commander in the neck, the only unarmored area visible at that angle, nearly severing the alien's head from his body. The death of their commander sent the Zephyrians into a frenzy. They began bombing the jungle indiscriminately, their disciplined military precision giving way to frustrated rage. But bombs were useless against a single man who knew every hiding place, every secret path, every cave and hollow in 50 square kilometers of wilderness. Marcus began using their fury against them. He led patrols into ambush zones where the jungle itself became a weapon. Unstable ground gave way under heavy alien armor, dropping soldiers into concealed pits lined with sharpened stakes. Triggered rockfalls crushed search teams in narrow ravines. Carefully weakened tree branches fell at precisely the right moments to destroy alien equipment. The jungle had become alive with death, and Marcus was its guiding intelligence. But the Zephyrians were learning too. They brought in specialist hunters, soldiers trained in tracking the most dangerous prey across dozens of worlds. They deployed micro-drones the size of insects, scanning equipment that could detect heartbeats from kilometers away, and weapons that could level entire sections of forest. The hunt was intensifying, becoming a deadly game of move and counter-move between human cunning and alien technology. Marcus could feel the net tightening around him as more resources poured into the jungle. Soon, even his vast knowledge of the terrain wouldn't be enough to keep him hidden. But he had one more card to play, one final gambit that would either save the jungle or cost him his life. Hidden in his deepest cache was equipment that officially didn't exist, weapons from research programs that were buried so deep that their existence was known to only a handful of people. The Zephyrians thought they were hunting one man with a rifle. They were about to discover what a human could do when he stopped playing by the rules of conventional warfare. Marcus loaded the last of his conventional ammunition and began moving toward his final position. The real battle was about to begin. The experimental weapon felt alien in Marcus's hands despite its human origin. Project Prometheus had been buried so deep in black-budget funding that its very existence was a state secret worth killing for. The rifle looked like a standard sniper weapon, but its internals housed technology that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Rail-assisted electromagnetic acceleration combined with smart ammunition that could adjust its trajectory in flight. Each round carried a microprocessor capable of making thousands of calculations per second, guided by targeting data from Marcus's enhanced scope. The weapon could fire through solid rock, around corners, and hit targets that conventional firearms couldn't even dream of reaching. But it only had 12 rounds, and each shot would drain the weapon's power cells significantly. Marcus would have to make every bullet count. The Zephyrians had changed tactics after losing their commander. Instead of random patrols, they now moved in coordinated hunter-killer teams, each group equipped with overlapping scanner arrays and communication relays. They had learned to avoid the obvious ambush points and were systematically mapping every square meter of jungle. Above the canopy, orbital platforms had begun deploying a grid of surveillance satellites, each one the size of a baseball but packed with sensors that could detect the chemical signature of human perspiration from space. The net was closing, and Marcus could feel the walls of his domain shrinking with each passing hour. But the aliens had made a critical error in their escalation. They had become so focused on finding one human that they had forgotten to protect their own infrastructure. The forward base, their landing ships, the orbital relay stations that coordinated their planetary assault, all of these had been left with reduced defenses while every available soldier joined the hunt. Marcus had spent 3 days studying the alien technology through his scope, watching their routines, learning their procedures. Zephyrian engineering was efficient but predictable. Their shield generators followed standard patterns. Their communication arrays had obvious vulnerable points. Their landing ships, for all their advanced technology, still had to obey the basic laws of physics. The fourth kill was different from the others. Marcus waited until a maintenance team was servicing one of the shield generators protecting the forward base. The electromagnetic round punched through the generator's primary coupling, and the entire defensive grid collapsed in a cascade failure that lit up the jungle for miles. Before the aliens could respond, Marcus was already moving to his next position. He triggered pre-positioned explosive charges as he ran, bringing down massive trees across the main access routes to the base. The aliens found themselves trapped in their own fortress, cut off from reinforcement and surrounded by an enemy they couldn't see. The smart rounds made kills that should have been impossible. Marcus fired through solid tree trunks, the ammunition adjusting its course to emerge precisely where alien heads would be 3 seconds later. He shot around corners, using ricochets calculated by the round's onboard computer to hit targets that weren't even in his line of sight. Each shot was a masterpiece of ballistics and timing. The Zephyrians began to believe they were facing an entire army rather than a single sniper. How else could they explain shots that came from impossible angles, that ignored their cover, that seemed to predict their movements with supernatural accuracy? The psychological warfare was as important as the physical damage. The aliens started jumping at shadows, firing at movements that existed only in their imagination. Their coordinated formations broke down as individual soldiers panicked and broke ranks. The disciplined military machine that had conquered 17 worlds was unraveling in the face of an enemy that couldn't be found or fought by conventional means. Sub-Commander Vrachtel, the highest-ranking officer still alive, made the decision that would doom his entire operation. Convinced that he was facing a technologically superior force hidden somewhere in the jungle, he called for orbital bombardment of his own position. If the humans had weapons that could penetrate Zephyrian shields and armor, the only solution was to glass the entire area from space. Marcus intercepted the communication and realized he had perhaps an hour before the bombardment began. The jungle, his home for 6 years, would be reduced to radioactive ash. Everything that lived in these 50 square kilometers would die to eliminate one human sniper. But Marcus wasn't just any human. He was the product of programs that had pushed the boundaries of what soldiers could become. Enhanced reflexes, improved endurance, tactical intelligence that bordered on the supernatural, and most importantly, he was absolutely, completely, magnificently human in his refusal to give up. The final cache contained more than weapons. Buried in a waterproof vault beneath 40 feet of jungle soil was a complete tactical nuclear device, liberated from a decommissioned weapons program that officially never existed. It was small, clean, and powerful enough to level several city blocks. Marcus had hoped never to use it. Nuclear weapons were a last resort, a line that once crossed could never be uncrossed. But the Zephyrians had made their choice when they decided to burn the jungle. They would learn why humans were the only species to successfully weaponize the atom, and why Earth's defenders would go to any length to protect their world. The device was surprisingly portable, about the size of a large backpack. Marcus strapped it to his chest and began moving toward the alien landing ships. If he was going to die, he would take as many of the invaders with him as possible. The Zephyrians detected him moving through their perimeter with 5 minutes to spare before the orbital bombardment began. Every remaining soldier converged on his position, energy weapons lighting up the jungle like a deadly light show. Marcus moved through the chaos like a force of nature, the experimental rifle spitting smart rounds that found their targets regardless of cover or concealment. He reached the landing field as the first energy beams began falling from orbit. The massive alien ships sat in neat rows, their hulls gleaming in the firelight of the burning jungle. Marcus armed the nuclear device and set the timer for 60 seconds. The Zephyrians surrounding him realized what he was planning and began falling back in terror. They had weapons that could melt stone, armor that could withstand anything in their arsenal, and the support of a fleet that had conquered worlds. But none of that mattered when faced with a human who had decided that victory was worth any price. Marcus stood in the center of the landing field, the nuclear device counting down on his chest, and began laughing. The sound carried across the jungle, audible even over the roar of the orbital bombardment. It was the laughter of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain through intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to surrender. The timer reached 0. The explosion was visible from orbit, a miniature sun that briefly outshone the alien energy weapons. When the light faded, a 2-kilometer crater marked the spot where the Zephyrian landing fleet had been. The electromagnetic pulse disabled every piece of alien technology within 50 kilometers, leaving the survivors stranded on a hostile world with no way to call for help. Above the devastation, Admiral Vextar stared at his tactical displays in shock. An entire battalion had been eliminated by a single human. Their forward base was destroyed, their landing fleet was gone, and the orbital bombardment had been ineffective against an enemy who had already accomplished his mission. For the first time in his military career, Vextar gave the order to retreat. The Zephyrian fleet pulled back from Earth's atmosphere, their reports describing a world defended by weapons they didn't understand and warriors who would rather die than surrender. The jungle began to heal almost immediately. Where the nuclear fire had burned, new growth pushed up through the ash. Life on Earth was resilient, adaptable, and absolutely determined to survive, just like its defenders. In hidden bunkers around the world, human survivors monitored alien communications and learned that Earth had been marked as a restricted zone. The Zephyrian Empire classified the planet as defended by unknown superweapons and advised all future expeditions to avoid the system entirely. They never learned that their entire invasion fleet had been stopped by one man with a rifle and an unbreakable will to protect his world. They never discovered that the fearsome defender they faced was a single human who had chosen to become one with the wilderness that had sheltered him. Marcus Chen's name was never recorded in any official history. The governments that might have honored him were gone, destroyed in the initial bombardment. But the jungle remembered. In the songs of the birds, the whisper of the wind through the leaves, and the eternal cycle of growth and renewal, the forest kept the memory of the sniper who had saved Earth. The Zephyrians had entered the jungle expecting to find a primitive world ripe for conquest. Instead, they found humanity at its most dangerous, cornered, desperate, and absolutely unwilling to go quietly into the night. They learned that some prey, when threatened, becomes the hunter, and that Earth's defenders would pay any price to protect their home. The jungle had answered their invasion with a sniper nobody knew and everyone feared. And in that answer, the aliens heard the voice of a species that would never kneel, never surrender, and never stop fighting for the world they called home.